Welcome, Chosen One. Somewhere, right now, someone is deleting a message thread they should have deleted months ago. Somewhere, right now, someone is realizing the plan they built in secret, the plan they were so proud of, the plan they whispered about behind closed doors, never actually worked. Not once, not for a single day. And the wildest part? You were never confused. You were never behind. You were never the last one to know. You knew. You always knew. They thought you were the easy one, the distracted one, the one too busy living your life to notice the quiet meetings, the group chats that went silent when you walked in, the sudden closeness between people who used to barely speak. They built an entire operation around the idea that you don't pay attention, that you're soft, that you're slow, that you could be moved around like a piece on a board you didn't even know existed. Chosen One, they spent months on this, months, planning phone calls, timed conversations, strategic silences. They rehearsed what they'd say when the moment finally came, when they'd finally catch you off guard, when they'd finally get to watch your face fall apart in real time. And here's the part that's going to sting them worse than anything else ever could. You already knew. Before the first meeting, before the first whispered plan, you knew, and you let them build it anyway. This is not a story about being blindsided. This is a story about being 3 steps ahead of people who thought you couldn't count to 1. Before we go further, Chosen One, hit that like button and subscribe. Not for me. Pay it back to the universe, because what you're about to hear is going to change how you look at every quiet room you've ever walked into. Let's talk about what patience actually looks like from the outside. Because they got it wrong. They mistook your calm for cluelessness. They mistook your silence for absence. They mistook the fact that you didn't confront them, didn't panic, didn't scramble to defend yourself as proof that you had no idea what was happening around you. What they never understood is that the quietest people in the room are usually the ones who see the most. You weren't the one who didn't notice. You were the one who never needed to react. And the difference between those two things is the entire reason they're panicking right now. Now let's move forward, step by step. Because Chosen One, once you understand exactly how deep this went, exactly how long they worked on it, and exactly how badly it backfired, you're never going to underestimate your own stillness again. Number 1. The first whisper that started it all. It never begins with a plan. It begins with a comment. Something small, something almost forgettable. Someone says your name in a tone that doesn't match the room. Someone laughs a little too long at something that wasn't funny. Someone glances at someone else right after you speak, just for half a second, just long enough to mean something. That's how it always starts. Not with a declaration of war, but with a flicker, a test, a tiny probe to see if you'll notice. You noticed. Of course you noticed. You clocked it the way you clock everything, quietly, without changing your expression, without giving them the satisfaction of a reaction. That first whisper was supposed to be invisible. It was supposed to slide past you the way it slides past everyone else who's too busy, too trusting, too preoccupied with their own life to catch a shift in tone. But you're not everyone else. You've spent your whole life reading rooms other people walk through blind. Think about what that first moment really was. It was a test balloon, a trial run. They wanted to know if the ground was soft enough to build on. And here's the part that should make you sit up straight. Chosen One. You let them think it was. You didn't confront the comment. You didn't call out the glance. You didn't demand an explanation for the laugh that didn't fit. You filed it away, the same way you file away everything, quietly, precisely, without announcing that you're keeping score. Imagine a spider sitting perfectly still at the edge of its web. It doesn't chase the fly. It doesn't lunge the second something brushes a single thread. It waits, because the moment it reveals itself too early, the prey scatters, and the whole structure has to be rebuilt from nothing. That's what your stillness was. Not ignorance. Architecture. You let the thread move so you could feel exactly how much weight was pressing on it. They thought your lack of reaction meant you hadn't felt anything at all. That's the mistake that follows them through this entire story. They confused a controlled response with the absence of awareness. They confused your refusal to escalate with an inability to notice. And because that first whisper went unanswered, they got bold. They took your silence as permission. They took your calm as an invitation to keep going. Here's a question that's probably been sitting in the back of your mind for a while now. Why didn't you say something the moment you felt it? Why did you let that first comment slide instead of shutting it down on the spot? Because, chosen one, confronting a whisper does nothing except teach the whisperer to be quieter next time. It doesn't end anything. It just pushes the behavior underground where you can't track it anymore. You didn't want it to disappear. You wanted to see how far it would go, and more importantly, who else would climb on board once it started moving. That's the part they never accounted for. They thought they were testing you. In reality, you were testing them. Every unanswered comment was bait. Every ignored glance was rope, and you were handing it to them one small length at a time, watching to see exactly how they'd choose to use it. The people who plan against someone quiet always make the same fatal assumption. They assume quiet means unaware. They assume stillness means passive. And that single assumption is the crack that eventually swallows the entire plan whole. So when you look back now at that very first whisper, the one that felt so small it barely registered, understand what it actually was. It wasn't the beginning of their plan. It was the beginning of your patience being tested. And it was the first move in a game they didn't know they were already losing. Number 2, the meetings you weren't invited to. At some point, the whispers stopped being enough for them. Whispers don't build anything on their own. They needed structure. They needed a room, a time, a reason to gather without you there. So the meetings started. Small ones at first. A coffee that turned into 2. A phone call that ran longer than it should have. A group chat created with a name that meant nothing on the surface, but excluded exactly the one person it was built to discuss. You weren't there for any of it. That was the entire point. They needed a space where they could say things out loud that they'd never say to your face, plan things they'd never admit to planning, agree on a version of events that painted you as the problem before you'd even been told there was a problem to begin with. That's the ugly architecture underneath most quiet campaigns like this one. They don't confront you. They build a case against you in rooms you're never allowed into, so that by the time it reaches you, it already has momentum, already has witnesses, already has a story that isn't yours to correct. Here's the part they never expected. You knew the meetings were happening before anyone told you. Not because someone leaked it to you, not because you had a source in the room, but because you noticed the pattern the way you notice every pattern. The timing that suddenly didn't add up. The stories that suddenly felt rehearsed. The way certain people started acting slightly too normal around you. The kind of normal that only exists when someone is actively trying not to give something away. Imagine a group of people building a case file behind a closed door, convinced the door is soundproof, convinced the walls hide everything, never once considering that the person they're building the file about has spent their entire life reading closed doors from the outside. That's what those meetings were to you. Not a mystery, a pattern you'd already learned to recognize long before this particular group ever tried it. You might be asking yourself right now why you didn't just walk in and shut it down the moment you suspected it. Why let a room full of people build a narrative against you without interrupting it? Because, chosen one, walking in uninvited hands them exactly what they want. It gives them a reaction to point to. It gives them a story where you're the one who barged in, the one who got defensive, the one who proved their point for them. Silence forces them to keep building on a foundation that was never as stable as they believed. And here's the detail that should sit heavy with you. Every meeting they held without you didn't weaken your position, it strengthened it. Every time they gathered to discuss you, they revealed a little more of their hand, a little more of their intention, a little more of exactly who was involved and exactly how far they were willing to go. You weren't losing information by being excluded. You were gaining it, piece by piece, meeting by meeting, without ever having to ask a single question. That's the quiet advantage nobody talks about. The people plotting in a closed room think they're protected by the door. What they don't realize is that everything discussed behind that door eventually leaks into behavior, into tone, into the small inconsistencies that a patient observer catches without even trying. They built their entire strategy assuming you'd never see behind the door. You didn't need to see behind it, you just had to watch what walked out of it. Number 3. The tell they didn't know they gave. Every plan has a tell, a single detail that gives everything away if you know exactly where to look. Most people never find it because they're too busy reacting to the surface of a situation instead of studying its structure. You are not most people. You found the tell almost immediately, and once you found it, the entire plan unraveled in your mind long before it unraveled in theirs. For you, it was something small, a pause before someone answered a question they should have answered instantly. A story that had one detail too many, the kind of detail people add when they're overcompensating for a lie. A person who suddenly became too kind, too attentive, too eager to check in on you in a way that felt less like care and more like reconnaissance. You noticed it because you notice everything, and once you notice one crack, you can't help but trace it back to its source. Here's what they never understood about people like you. You don't need a confession. You don't need someone to slip up and admit what they've been doing. You read behavior the way other people read text. The over-explaining, the sudden generosity, the careful avoidance of certain topics, the way a person's eyes move when they're managing a story instead of simply telling the truth. Every single one of those signals told you everything you needed to know, long before anyone said a word directly to you. Imagine a magician mid-trick, so confident in the misdirection that he forgets to check whether the audience is actually looking where he wants them to look. You were never looking at the hand he wanted you to look at. You were watching the other hand the entire time, the one doing the actual work, the one he assumed nobody would bother to track. That's what the tell was, a moment where they thought the trick was working, and the whole time you already knew exactly where the coin was hidden. You might wonder why the tell mattered so much if you already suspected something was happening, because a suspicion is a feeling and a tell is proof. The moment you caught that inconsistency, that over-explained story, that carefully managed behavior, your suspicion turned into certainty. And once you have certainty, chosen one, you stop reacting to possibilities and start responding to facts. That shift changes everything about how someone carries themselves, even if nobody else around them can see the difference. This is the part that should make you sit back for a second. From the moment you caught that first tell, you weren't guessing anymore. You were simply watching a plan you already understood play out in slow motion, waiting to see if they'd catch themselves before it was too late. They never did, because people who are busy managing a lie rarely have the awareness left over to notice they're being read the entire time. They were so focused on controlling how you'd see them that they never stopped to consider you'd already seen straight through it. That's the tell they didn't know they gave. Not a single dramatic slip, just the slow accumulation of small inconsistencies that only a patient, observant mind could ever piece together into a full picture. And you pieced it together long before they finished building the thing they were so proud of. Number 4. The night they thought they had you. Every plan like this has a night, a specific moment they've been building toward without even realizing it, the moment they imagine will finally land the blow they've been preparing for months. For them, it might have looked like a dinner, a gathering, an ordinary evening where the conversation would suddenly turn. where the comment they'd rehearsed would finally get said out loud, where you would finally react the way they needed you to react, so their story could be complete. They walked into that night confident. You could feel it in the air the second you arrived. The slightly too friendly greetings, the way certain people kept glancing at each other like they were checking a script, the tension underneath the small talk, the kind of tension that exists when a group of people is waiting for a cue that only they know is coming. They thought this was their night, the night the months of planning would finally pay off. And then it happened. The comment came, sharper than it needed to be, dressed up as a joke, aimed directly at you in front of enough people to make it sting the way they wanted it to sting. This was the moment. This was what all those meetings, all those whispers, all those months of quiet strategy had been building toward. And chosen one, you didn't flinch. You smiled. You let a small silence sit in the room, just long enough for everyone to feel it, without you having to do a single thing to create it. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't explain. You didn't give them the reaction they had spent months preparing for. You simply looked at the person who said it, calm, unreadable, and let the silence do what silence always does to people who expected chaos and got nothing instead. Imagine an army marching for months toward a single battle, convinced the enemy has no idea they're coming, only to arrive and find the gates wide open, the field empty, nothing to fight, because the person they came to conquer already knew the exact hour they'd arrive. That was this night. They brought their whole strategy to the table, and you brought nothing but stillness. And stillness is the one weapon no amount of planning can prepare someone for. You might ask yourself why it felt anticlimactic in the moment, why you didn't feel a rush of vindication or anger, or the urge to finally say everything you'd been holding back. Because chosen one, you'd already processed all of it long before that night arrived. The shock was never yours to feel. It belonged entirely to them, the moment they realized the reaction they'd built an entire plan around simply wasn't coming. That's the night they thought they had you. And it's the night they walked away for the first time, wondering if maybe, just maybe, you'd known the whole time. Number 5. The moment their confidence started to crack. After that night, something shifted, and it wasn't in you. It was in them. The confidence that carried them through months of planning started to wobble the second their big moment failed to produce the reaction they needed. People who build a case against someone in secret depend entirely on that person eventually confirming the story for them. They need the anger, the confrontation, the meltdown, something they can point to and say, "See, this is exactly what we said would happen." You never gave them that. And the absence of that reaction did something to them that no confrontation ever could have. It made them start questioning their own narrative. If the story they'd built about you was true, why weren't you acting the way the story said you would? Why were you still calm? Why were you still kind in rooms where they expected you to be cold? Why did you keep showing up steady when every part of their plan assumed you'd eventually crumble? That question sat with them longer than they wanted to admit. You could see it in the way certain people started avoiding your eyes, the way conversations that used to flow easily suddenly needed more effort, the way the group that used to move together started drifting slightly apart. Doubt is a slow poison, chosen one, and it spreads fastest among people who built their entire plan on an assumption they never bothered to test. Imagine a house built on a foundation nobody actually checked, everyone assuming the ground beneath it was solid, simply because nobody had fallen through yet. And then one small crack appears, barely visible, easy to ignore at first. But once someone notices it, they can't stop looking at it, can't stop wondering how deep it goes, can't stop imagining the whole structure giving way beneath them. That crack was your calm. That crack was your refusal to perform the collapse they'd written for you. Here's what you need to understand about this stage of the story. Their confidence didn't break because you did anything dramatic. It broke because reality refused to match their prediction, and nothing unsettles a person more than watching their own carefully constructed narrative fail to hold up against the truth standing right in front of them. They started second-guessing each other. They started wondering who had overstated things, who had exaggerated, who had convinced everyone else to commit to a plan that clearly wasn't landing the way it was supposed to. You might wonder if you felt any satisfaction watching that crack widen. Maybe a little. But mostly what you felt was confirmation. Confirmation that your instincts had been right from the very first whisper. Confirmation that stillness really was the stronger move. Confirmation that the version of yourself who chose patience over confrontation had understood something they never gave you credit for understanding. That's the moment their confidence started to crack. Quietly, privately, in ways they'll never fully admit to each other. And once that crack appears, chosen one, there's no plan strong enough to hold the structure together for much longer. Number 6. The ally who switched sides without telling you. Every plan like this has a weak link. Someone who was never as committed to the plotting as everyone else believed. Someone who agreed to be involved out of pressure, or loyalty to the wrong person, or simple fear of being the one left out of the group if they didn't go along with it. And somewhere in the middle of all this, that person started to feel the weight of what they were part of. You might not have known exactly who it was at first, but you felt the shift, the way you feel every shift. A change in tone, a look that lingered a second too long, a small kindness offered at a moment when kindness didn't quite fit the pattern everyone else was following. That was your signal. Someone in that circle was quietly stepping back from the plan without ever announcing it. Here's the part that matters most, chosen one. You didn't need them to confess anything. You didn't need a dramatic moment where they pulled you aside and told you everything. You simply noticed the change in behavior and understood exactly what it meant. Someone had seen enough. Someone had realized the plan didn't sit right with them anymore. Someone had started quietly distancing themselves from the group without the courage to fully admit why. Imagine a chain holding steady under pressure until one link, quietly, invisibly, begins to soften from the inside. Nobody sees it happening. Nobody hears it happening. But the moment enough weight is applied, that one weak link is the first thing to give. And once it gives, the entire chain loses its strength all at once. That was the ally who switched sides. Not loudly, not publicly, just a slow, invisible softening that eventually changed the shape of everything. You never confronted that person either. You let them carry whatever guilt they were carrying in silence, because forcing someone to confess rarely produces anything except defensiveness. Instead, you simply treated them the way you'd always treated them, calm, unbothered, present. And that consistency did something to them that no accusation ever could. It made them feel the full weight of what they'd almost done to someone who never gave them a single reason to. You might wonder why this detail matters so much in the larger story. Because it proves something important, chosen one. Plans built in secret rarely stay secret forever. Not because someone gets caught, but because people involved in something that doesn't sit right with them eventually can't carry the weight alone. Somebody always breaks quietly before the whole thing breaks loudly. And when they do, the plan loses more than a participant. It loses its certainty. That's the ally who switched sides without ever telling you directly. And whether you ever learn their name or not, you already know exactly what happened, because you've read behavior like this your entire life, and you read it perfectly this time too. Number 7. The story that stopped adding up. Every fabricated narrative eventually reaches a point where it can't hold its own weight anymore. Too many people involved, too many conversations happening separately, too many small details that were never coordinated properly in the first place. That's what happened here. The story they built about you, the one designed to make you look like the problem, the one meant to justify everything they'd been planning behind closed doors, started contradicting itself the longer it existed. You noticed it before anyone else did. Of course you did. One version of events said one thing, a slightly different version, told by a different person, said something else entirely. The timeline didn't line up. The reasons kept shifting depending on who was defending the plan and who was starting to feel uncomfortable with it. What began as a single coordinated narrative slowly turned into several competing versions of the same story, each one slightly more desperate than the last to make sense of something that never made sense to begin with. Here's what people forget when they build a case against someone quietly. Lies require maintenance. They require every single person involved to remember exactly the same details, exactly the same order of events, exactly the same tone, every single time the story gets repeated. And the moment more than 2 or 3 people are involved, that kind of precision becomes almost impossible to sustain. Somebody always forgets a detail. Somebody always adds something that wasn't there before. Somebody always contradicts what someone else already said. Imagine a group of people trying to hold up a single heavy object using only their fingertips. Each person convinced the others are bearing most of the weight. The moment one person shifts even slightly, the whole thing wobbles, and everyone has to scramble to catch it before it falls completely. That's what their story became. A structure held up by fingertips, wobbling every time someone repeated it slightly differently than the last person did. You watched this happen with the same patience you'd shown from the very beginning. You didn't point out the contradictions. You didn't correct the record. You let the story keep wobbling under its own weight, because the moment you stepped in to correct it, you'd be handing them a united front to rally around. Silence forced them to keep managing a narrative that was falling apart entirely on its own, without your help, without your interference, without you lifting a single finger. You might be wondering why it mattered so much that the story stopped adding up, if nobody outside the group was paying close attention anyway. Because Chosen One, the people inside that group were paying attention. And once the story stopped making sense even to the people who built it, the plan lost its most important ingredient: belief. A plan built on a story nobody fully believes anymore isn't a plan. It's just a group of uncomfortable people quietly waiting for an exit. That's the story that stopped adding up, not because you exposed it, but because it was never sturdy enough to survive its own repetition. Chosen One, before we go further into how this entire plan collapsed on itself, drop the number 77 in the comments right now. Not for luck, as a signal. A marker that says you're still here, still watching, still exactly as aware as you've always been, even when everyone around you assumed otherwise. And if this message is landing the way it should be landing, hit that like button, subscribe, and consider it your way of paying this back to the universe. Now let's keep going, because the part where it all comes apart is next. Number 8. The day they realized you already knew. There's always a single moment in a story like this where the group finally understands they were never actually ahead. For this circle, it came quietly, the way most real reckonings do. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It wasn't you standing up in a room and announcing everything you'd pieced together over the past several months. It was smaller than that, and somehow far more devastating. Someone said something in passing, testing the water one more time, expecting you to react the way the old version of you might have reacted, confused, hurt, caught off guard. And instead, you responded with a detail, a small one, a fact you shouldn't have known unless you'd been paying far closer attention than anyone gave you credit for. And in that single second, you watched it land. You watched the realization move across their face like a slow wave. The understanding that you hadn't been oblivious for even one day of this entire process. That's the moment everything shifted for them, Chosen One. Because up until then, their entire plan rested on a single assumption: that you didn't know, that you couldn't know, that you were too trusting or too distracted or too kind to ever notice what was happening around you. And in one small sentence, that assumption collapsed completely. Every meeting they thought was private, every whisper they thought was invisible, every carefully managed story they thought you'd swallowed whole. All of it, suddenly, retroactively exposed as something you'd been watching the entire time. Imagine spending months building an elaborate structure in secret, confident nobody could see it from the outside, only to discover the person you were building it around had been watching through a window you didn't even know existed, the entire time, calmly, quietly, without ever once giving away that they could see everything. That's the day they realized you already knew, not a confrontation. A quiet unraveling of every assumption their entire plan had been built on. You didn't gloat, you didn't explain how long you'd known, or what exactly had tipped you off. You simply let the moment sit there, let them sit with the discomfort of understanding they'd spent months planning something against a person who'd already seen through it from the very beginning. That silence, chosen one, was heavier than any accusation could have ever been. You might wonder why you chose that particular moment to let it show, even accidentally. Maybe you didn't choose it at all. Maybe it simply slipped out because you'd been carrying certainty for so long that eventually it had nowhere left to go except into the open. Either way, the effect was the same. The plan they'd spent months building didn't end with a confrontation. It ended with the quiet horror of realizing it had never actually been hidden at all. That's the day they realized you already knew, and it's the day the entire plan stopped being something they controlled and started being something they were simply trying to survive. Number 9. The silence that followed. After that moment, something changed in the group that no one wanted to name out loud. The whispers stopped. The meetings quietly dissolved without anyone officially calling them off. The group chat that used to light up with quiet plotting went silent, not because anyone deleted it, but because nobody had anything left to say. What do you say to each other after you've spent months building a case against someone who already understood every single move you made? This is the part of the story people underestimate, chosen one. The silence that follows a failed plan is almost always louder than the plan itself ever was. Because in that silence, everyone involved is forced to sit with what they actually did. Not what they told themselves they were doing, not the justified version of events they used to convince themselves it was fine, but the real thing. Months spent plotting against someone who never gave them a single real reason to. You noticed the silence, the same way you'd noticed everything else. The group that used to move as one suddenly felt fractured, careful, distant from each other, in a way it had never been before. People who used to defend the plan enthusiastically suddenly avoided the topic entirely. People who used to laugh along with the whispers suddenly seemed uncomfortable being reminded of them. Guilt has a way of rearranging a room even when nobody says a single word about it. Imagine a group of people who spent months building a fire together, convinced it would burn exactly the way they wanted it to, only to watch it collapse in on itself the moment it was finally lit, leaving nothing but smoke and the uncomfortable silence of people who have to explain to themselves why they thought this was ever a good idea. That's the silence that followed, not peace, just the aftermath of a plan that ran out of oxygen the second it met the person it was built against. You didn't fill that silence either. You didn't reach out to smooth things over. You didn't try to rebuild the relationships the way you might have once felt obligated to. You simply let the silence exist, because silence, chosen one, is often the most honest response to a situation built entirely on dishonesty. Let them sit in it. Let them figure out what to do with the discomfort of having planned something they now have to live with, quietly, privately, without resolution. You might ask yourself if that silence ever felt lonely. Maybe, for a moment. But mostly, it felt like clarity, because in that silence, you finally understood exactly who had been willing to spend months plotting against you, and exactly who you no longer needed to make room for in your life. That's not a loss, chosen one. That's information, and information is something you've always known exactly what to do with. Number 10. The version of you they never accounted for. Here's what none of them ever understood. Not from the very first whisper to the very last uncomfortable silence. They were planning against a version of you that only existed in their imagination. A version built entirely on assumptions, on old impressions, on the idea that people don't change, don't grow, don't develop the kind of quiet awareness that comes from surviving enough rooms exactly like the one they were building. They planned for the person they thought you still were, not the person you'd actually become. That gap, chosen one, is where the entire plan fell apart before it ever had a chance to succeed. They imagined someone who would panic, someone who would need to defend themselves loudly, someone who would come to them in tears, asking what they'd done wrong, someone whose entire sense of self depended on being liked by exactly the people who were plotting against them. That person might have existed once, but months of quiet growth, quiet observation, quiet self-trust had already replaced that person with someone far harder to shake. Think about what it actually means to plan against someone using an outdated blueprint. It's like preparing for a storm using a forecast from a decade ago, confident the weather will behave exactly the way it used to, never considering that everything about the conditions has shifted since then. They walked into this entire plan using a version of you that simply didn't exist anymore, and every single miscalculation that followed traced back to that one fundamental error. Imagine an opponent studying old footage of a fighter, memorizing every weakness from years ago, walking into the ring convinced they know exactly how this fight will go, only to face someone who has spent every year since then training away every single one of those old vulnerabilities. That's what this entire plan was. A strategy built on old footage, aimed at someone who had already evolved past every weakness they thought they were exploiting. You might wonder how you managed to become that version of yourself without even realizing it was happening. Maybe it happened slowly, through every quiet moment you chose stillness over reaction. Maybe it happened through every earlier version of this exact situation, every earlier group, every earlier plan that taught you a little more about how to read a room before the room ever knew it was being read. Either way, chosen one, the version of you they planned against simply wasn't home anymore, and nothing they built could ever land against someone who'd already outgrown the blueprint. That's the version of you they never accounted for, and it's the single biggest reason this entire plan was destined to fail before the first whisper was ever spoken. Number 11. What they lost that they didn't expect to lose. When a plan like this fails, chosen one, the people behind it rarely walk away only losing the plan itself. They lose something bigger, something they never calculated as a possible cost when they started building this in the first place. They lose credibility with each other. They lose the easy trust that used to exist between them. They lose the ability to look at one another without remembering exactly what they were willing to do, quietly, over months, to someone who never deserved it. Think about what happens to a group after something like this collapses. The person who suggested the plan first now carries the weight of having started something that made everyone else complicit. The people who went along with it now carry the quiet discomfort of knowing they didn't have the courage to say no when it mattered. The one who eventually softened, who quietly stepped back, now carries a strange mix of relief and guilt, knowing they were part of it for as long as they were. Nobody walks away from something like this clean, chosen one. Everyone carries a different piece of it. And here's what they never expected to lose most of all. They lost the story they told themselves about who they were. Before this, they probably believed they were reasonable people. People who wouldn't do something like this. People who had good intentions, even when their actions didn't match. Watching the plan collapse forced every single one of them to face a version of themselves they'd rather not look at directly. That kind of loss doesn't heal quickly. It sits with people for a long time. Imagine a group of people who spent months building a wall, convinced it would keep something out, only to watch it collapse under its own weight and realize, standing in the rubble, that the wall was never protecting them from anything. It was just something they built out of fear, dressed up as strategy. That's what they're left standing in now, chosen one. Not victory, not vindication, just the rubble of something they built for no good reason at all. You didn't take anything from them directly. You never had to. Their own plan cost them more than you ever could have, and it did it without you lifting a single finger, without you saying a single unkind word, without you ever needing to prove anything to anyone. That's the quiet, brutal math of a plan built against someone who was simply too aware to fall for it. You might wonder if you feel anything watching them carry that weight now. Maybe a little sadness, if you're honest. Not for what happened to you, but for what they chose to become in the process of trying to bring you down. That's a heavier loss than they'll ever fully admit, and it's one they built entirely by themselves. Number 12. Why your calm was never an accident. By now, chosen one, it should be clear that nothing about how you handled this was random. It wasn't luck that you noticed the first whisper. It wasn't luck that you caught the tell nobody else caught. It wasn't luck that you stayed calm on the night they thought they finally had you. Every single one of those moments was a choice, built on years of learning exactly how to move through rooms that weren't always built with you in mind. Your calm was never the absence of feeling. It was the presence of control. You felt every single thing they did. The whispers stung. The exclusion hurt. The betrayal, when it finally became undeniable, cut exactly as deep as it would cut anyone. The difference between you and the people who built this plan is that you never let what you felt dictate what you did. You processed it privately, quietly, on your own terms, and you let the outside version of you remain steady, no matter what was happening underneath. That is not weakness, chosen one. That is one of the rarest forms of strength that exists. The ability to feel everything fully, while still choosing exactly how and when to respond to it. Most people can't separate those two things. Most people feel something and immediately act on it, giving away every advantage they might have had simply because they couldn't sit with discomfort long enough to think clearly through it. You never had that problem, and that's exactly why this entire plan never had a chance against you. Imagine a lake on the surface, perfectly still, undisturbed, calm enough that anyone looking at it would assume nothing was happening beneath it at all. And beneath that stillness, currents moving with precision, patterns shifting, an entire world of motion, completely invisible from above. That was you this entire time, calm on the surface, exactly because everything underneath was already fully processed, fully understood, fully under control. You might wonder if it would have been easier to just react the way they expected you to react. Maybe, in the short term. But chosen one, reacting the way they expected would have given them exactly what they needed to justify everything they did. Your calm denied them that satisfaction completely. It forced them to sit with a plan that produced absolutely nothing except their own unraveling, and that is a far heavier consequence than any argument or confrontation could have ever delivered. That's why your calm was never an accident. It was the single most deliberate thing you did through this entire situation, and it's the reason this story ends with them exposed and you exactly where you've always been, steady, aware, and completely unshaken. Number 13, she knew everything. Let's go back to where this all started, chosen one. She has no idea what we've been planning. That was the belief the entire plan was built on. That was the foundation, the assumption, the single sentence that gave everyone involved the confidence to keep going for months without ever questioning whether it was working. And it was wrong from the very first day. You knew about the whispers before they became meetings. You knew about the meetings before the story took shape. You caught the tell before anyone thought there was anything to catch. You felt the shift on the night they thought they finally had you, and you chose stillness instead of the reaction they needed. You watched the ally soften, watched the story stop adding up, watched the silence spread after they finally understood what you'd known the entire time. Every single stage of this plan, chosen one, happened in front of someone who was never as unaware as they assumed. This is the part that should sit with you the longest. It was never about proving them wrong. It was never about revenge or humiliation or making sure they understood exactly how badly they miscalculated. It was about something quieter than that. It was about trusting yourself enough to stay calm through months of being underestimated, without needing anyone else to validate that trust along the way. Imagine someone finishing a long, difficult chess match, watching their opponent knock over their own pieces in frustration, only to realize the opponent never understood they'd already lost several moves ago. That's this entire story, chosen one. Not a dramatic checkmate, not a public reveal, just the quiet, absolute certainty of someone who understood the whole board long before anyone else even realized the game had started. They planned for months to take you down, and the entire time, you knew everything. Not because you're paranoid, not because you go looking for enemies in every room you walk into, but because you've learned, through every version of this story you've lived before, that stillness sees more than panic ever could, and patience outlasts every plan built on the assumption that you're not paying attention. So here's where we close this chapter, chosen one. Not loudly, not with anger, just with the quiet understanding that you were never behind, never fooled, never the last one to know. You were exactly where you've always been, one step ahead, calm, aware, and completely unshaken by people who spent months trying to move a piece that was never actually where they thought it was. If this message landed exactly where it needed to land, hit like, subscribe, drop 77 in the comments, and share it with someone who needs to hear that their calm was never an accident either. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Take care, and goodbye.